say when I was dedicated to the cause of Lucifer, I was at that point a second generation witch.
I was laying there, practically naked, and I had her hold me as if I was naked. I couldn't talk. I couldn't open my eyes. I believe my eyes were rolled up back in my head.
There was evidence of human sacrifice on this site. One of my first questions I asked the guy, is there evidence of human sacrifice? And I'm looking around there, yes. We found the man with his fingers like who was a Richard Zachary.
And it started to come down the stairs, and there was disgusting smell. And at that point, that basically said, do you know what they did to us? And that's when I fled that home.
But no, they would touch me. They would take pictures of my head if they wanted to communicate with me. Human sacrifice. Human sacrifice. Human sacrifice. Human sacrifice. Implants are real, okay? You know, we've got them on X-ray, we've got them on CAT scan, we've got them on the Gauss meter, which measures magnetic field 7.5. We've got them on an ultrasound machine. It's right there. It's hard, physical evidence, not delusionary.
Welcome back to Conspirinormal, guys. We are here in the frozen tundra that was once Nashville, Tennessee. Over here in the Bighorn studio yet again. It's me, your host, Adam Sane, and the man that doesn't like his last name, he said on there.
Oh, but I do. It's Luke Skyrider.
and also Samurai Rob over here on the board. He's wearing a kimono, and we got sitting in Alyssa. Say hello, Alyssa. Hello. She's gonna sit in with us tonight because she likes the topic. Well, it's been a eventful couple of weeks. Before I get into that, though, do you guys enjoy the snow? And
it was fun, dude. It's fun every year. I went snowboarding.
Oh, you went snowboarding?
Yeah.
We got enough snow to do that this time, for sure.
Yeah.
We got like, what did we get? Like about a foot almost of snow?
8 inches or so, yeah.
Well, here we got 6 to 8 inches, and then up like north of Nashville, they got like 12.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot for us, really. But when you think about like what's going on, like right now as we're recording this, like New York and like Washington D.C., I think they got like 3 feet or something like that, man. I mean, like I seen pictures on the internet of cars just kind of like buried in snow, and as it like that system, they called it what was it, Jonas or something? Winter Storm Jonas.
Yeah.
It makes me think of the Weezer song, My Name is Jonas.
Me too.
As it moved further east, it like picked up steam and just pummeled the East Coast. So, although we have our guest on tonight, and he's in New York, but he upstate New York, I don't think he got anything.
Really?
So it's weird. I think he just like hugged the coast. So, you enjoy the snow, Mr. Rob?
Yeah. You guys grew up here. Did you guys have sleds when you were kids?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a sled.
Totally. See, that blows my mind. Like, I would never think to buy a sled here. But I go on Facebook and I see all these friends of mine that have kids, and they're all out like, yay, we get to use the sleds that we bought 6 years ago.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I had a sled, but I don't even remember where it came from. You know, it's like I think we just had it, or it was like a hand-me-down or something my dad had. And I remember sledding some when I was a little kid, but not like too much, obviously. You know, since you don't get a lot of snow in this area.
Yeah, I've got an old 80s snow thrasher, if anyone listening knows what that is. It's awesome.
Snow thrasher.
Snow thrasher. It's neon green, and it has metal rails in the bottom.
Nice.
Well, like I said, it's been an eventful 2 weeks. Started off the day after we recorded the last show to find out that a certain icon died, passed away. Someone that set a lot of trends and for the hipster community and hipster style, and that would be Grizzly Adams passed away.
Oh,
you know, something that
I didn't hear that.
Looks kind of looks like Luke a little bit now.
I thought I was rather like clean trimmed right now, dude.
Yeah, I think that joke kind of fell flat. It actually was going to talk about David Bowie, so going to talk a little bit about Bowie in the outro, but. What I wanted to kind of get into now was also something that was kind of on the internet like a couple of weeks ago. So we're like woefully behind the times. So I want to play a clip, Mr. Rob. This is something that some people may remember from the 2008 campaign that caused a little bit of a stir.
We're gonna spread happiness. We're gonna spread freedom. Obama's gonna change it. Obama's gonna lead 'em. We're gonna change it and rearrange it. We're gonna change the world. Now's the moment where he's forced to sing. Sing with all your heart. For our children.
Okay, Rob, you can stop. You can stop that one.
Please stop.
Okay.
Yes.
So that was from the 2008. During the 2008 campaign, it wasn't something that was put together by the Obama campaign. Far from it. It was some private group in, I believe, San Francisco,
Obviously.
which makes sense, right?
I've seen better
Yeah.
talent. I don't know if it's got talent.
But this was apparently used to say that Obama had this cult of personality, and that everybody was saying that Obama was the Messiah and Obama was going to save everybody. But in the last week or so, another candidate has come out with another song. And Rob, if you would be so kind as to play that one. I think, like, you know what I'm talking about.
Only because you
heard
have
this?
to.
Okay. Alyssa's, I think, heard it as well. We're going to play this one in its entirety, okay? It's like-
And if I could get a more adult version of that song, I'd listen to it.
I had to take my headphones off.
Well, it's interesting. Okay, as silly and as just annoying as that is, there was quite a bit, I think, on liberal media, or what everyone used to call it, mainstream media, about this song by the Freedom Girls at this Trump rally. I believe it was Pensacola, Florida. Okay, like I said, this was within the last 2 weeks, and this thing went viral on the internet. And just because it's three girls in red, white, and blue cheerleader outfits doing this dance. I don't know whether they're lip syncing or what it is.
Well, that wasn't live.
Do
I
they
can
have
tell you
the
that.
move where they
Yeah.
salute? You know,
Yeah, they were. Yeah,
like
yeah,
Heil
yeah.
Donald Trump.
What does an American salute look like?
Yeah.
Well, I guess you would just do the salute. Like the salute on your forehead.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah,
Thought they had like a special Trump one.
yeah. Well, you extend your.
I think it looks just like the German salute.
You know what's funny is that in schools before the 1940s, obviously before we fought Hitler and the Nazis, kids would praise allegiance to the flag in school with their hands outstretched in that way. And afterwards, it became the hand on over the heart, because obviously you don't want to confuse that
Right.
with Nazism, right? But that was the idea. You held your hand out towards the flag, and there's pictures of Boy Scouts doing that and such from
I've seen that before.
from the early 1900s. And the Hitler Youth was actually modeled off the Boy Scouts. That's kind of a digression. I find it interesting that you have this song, and no one kind of like in kind of like the conservative media will look at that and say, wait a minute, that's the same thing really as the Obama song. Yeah. It's basically the same.
Yeah, just better production value.
Yeah. Yeah. Which one?
Yeah.
It's just, you see that kind of like, I guess for the lack of a better word, the hypocrisy really of just like people were saying that people were up in arms about that Obama song in 2008. They were just like, this is a cult of personality. This is just like North Korea. This is just like what goes. This is like Mao in China with the kids praising him.
Which I agree with, but it's still the case today.
It's still the same thing for this Donald Trump stuff, right? It's still, and people were making that comparison with this, saying that this looked like North Korea. And apparently there's like a scene at the beginning of the movie, The Interview, which I haven't seen, where like people were comparing it to that.
Yeah,
So,
that's funny.
I just find it interesting that you got that dichotomy there.
Right,
with-
but is it something that was sanctioned by the candidates, or is that something that?
Oh,
just
it was sanctioned by the candidate. Yeah,
Is it just like something that like a school or something took upon themselves to do?
I'm not sure, but I mean,
because if it's something that someone just took upon themselves, then
well, I mean, in the case of the Obama kids, those kids singing the little choir about Obama, that was something I don't think was at a rally or at a campaign rally. That was just something that some group that was liberal minded or really liked Obama put together. You know, and that had nothing to do with an Obama rally. That wasn't sung at the rally.
Right, but the Donald Trump one did.
The Donald Trump one was sung at the rally.
Yeah,
like literally, if you watch the video, they're dancing. You see the people behind them. They're dancing, and there's the podium with the Trump sign on it. And literally, Trump is about to speak, and then after these girls
that's different.
Come on,
to me, that's different. You know, because the people for Obama, the kids for Obama, and all that stuff, they did that on their own. Like, no one said, hey, you should do this because people think kids are cute and we'll get more votes. You know, that was just something someone did because they supported him. The Donald Trump one, though, that's kind of messed up. Like,
that, well, I think they're essentially,
up with your own ideas,
I think they're essentially the same in message.
Right.
They're essentially the same in message, whether it's endorsed by the candidate or not. You know, and so if you're going to be consistent, if you're going to say, hey, I don't like the Obama thing. I don't like that we're praising a leader in a country where we don't have a monarch, where we don't have the great leader. Okay, then be consistent about this too as a conservative, Republican, whatever, and say, I don't like that either, because that's not, you know, that's also the same thing. We're extolling the great leader or the great savior of this country.
Right. So like you didn't support Obama before and you thought he was, you know, like it was being used as a ploy, but you support Donald Trump now and you're saying, oh, look how wonderful it is.
Oh, look how cute. Look how cute
well,
those
it's the
girls
same
are.
damn thing that they did before. So yeah, I see your point there.
Now in like MSNBC, liberal, more kind of that go over towards the Democrats or more liberal minded, they were criticizing it. But again, there's the inconsistency.
Right.
It's like
because these people had the Obama song on their iPod.
Yeah.
You know. But now it's being used as like, you know, oh, it's such a terrible tool.
I think Luke's about to fall asleep. You can't get into all the politics and stuff.
I mean, I hate politics, but I like politics. I don't know.
Yeah, you say
like
you hate it, but you like to talk about it too.
I'm curious about it. It concerns us all to some degree, you know.
Right, and it
affects us whether we like it or not.
And it's going to keep going too. I mean, we're really at the beginning of this, and just think how contentious it's already been since.
It's going to be a very interesting one.
June, July of last year. Yeah, it's going to be.
Oh God, I thought the elections were like coming up this winter. Like I thought,
well,
that's how
the primary elections are. You got the Iowa caucus here and the New Hampshire primary in about a couple weeks from now. We're recording this, right after Super Bowl. The both those I think they happen on the same day.
They should just do them at halftime.
Yeah, they should, or just do the election on the
more
Super
people
Bowl.
will watch it.
Yeah, so they'll start
right.
picking who it is that's going to be the nominee for both parties. And you were thinking we were talking about you were thinking Bernie Sanders is going to get. You guys are thinking Bernie Sanders is going to get the nomination for the Democrats.
I hope so.
And I find that really interesting because I mean, he is a contender, I think, but I really think that Hillary's gonna get it. I really do, because I see like she's the heir apparent, and I think that they make deals to have the person that they want in there, no matter what they do the primary. I think that's just all show.
Right.
I mean, the Republicans have done that before. The Democrats have done it before too.
Right. I'm not saying that she won't be. I just, out of the two of them, and I think Bernie Sanders, I think he's done a really good job as far as, you know, he's been in politics. You know, Donald Trump never has. Like, what the hell? You had The Apprentice. Get out of here. That doesn't make you someone worthy. You have a reality TV show. All right. Bernie Sanders has been in the government. He's been a politician. I'm not a big fan of politicians, but I think he has some good ideas. And I think that Hillary, not that she has bad ideas, but I think that she has gotten to a point where people don't really trust her.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Like,
people don't trust her. Really, I mean,
right,
I don't trust her. I don't trust her at all.
I think, like I said, I hope
if
she doesn't.
If she's the candidate, I don't think that the Democrats have a chance.
Yeah,
I really don't. I really don't.
There's the dog.
Oh man,
He's the silent guest until now.
I like what he has to say more.
sounds like Donald Trump.
But you know what? I haven't trusted Hillary since she was first lady. Really,
Right.
I mean, it's pretty obvious that.
Well, that's where she got in trouble with all the cover-ups, and that's all.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all the mud that they're dredging back up.
And you know, during the Monica Lewinsky scandal, I mean, she didn't. I mean, I think any wife probably in their right mind would have probably have just said, "Okay, screw it, I'm not going to stay with this guy." But she did because she realized that was her ticket for her own political career.
Right.
And she went into the Senate like shortly after that, ran for New York where she didn't live, you know. And then when she was Secretary of State, you know, that embarrassing Benghazi hearing where she said, "What difference does it make?" I mean, Hillary Clinton's dirty. I mean, the Clintons are both dirty, and I think people really know it. And Bernie Sanders has, he's really kind of galvanized a lot of young people, a lot of people that like, I mean, with the millennial generation.
Yep, and that's the thing. And there's more of them now than the baby boomers. So
yeah, what do you think about Bernie Sanders? Like, I mean, you get any opinion about any of this stuff?
He sounds like a hipster, an old hipster.
Well, he is kind of like an old hipster, right? I mean, he's an old like civil rights guy, and
I hate to be
he's a socialist.
I hate to be the bad guy here, but you know, if Trump got it, like things definitely would get interesting.
Well, let me ask you something. I was going to ask this to listen.
You just like chaos.
I do.
Yeah, you do.
I do. I gotta do.
There's the rise of the satanic Trump. What do you think what do you guys think is the impetus for people liking Trump? I mean, where do you think that comes from?
That's what I can't figure out, to be perfectly honest. I honestly thought it was a joke the first time I heard it till I saw a bumper sticker that said Trump for president. I was like, what? Really?
I mean, you think about it, like me growing up in the 80s, I remember hearing about Trump, and like he's just kind of like the sleazeball guy, you know? Like he just like he represented like what was worse, the worst thing about like the kind of the yuppie and like the traders on Wall Street, you know.
And I've asked a lot of people, and the only response I've gotten is, well, because he speaks his mind. It's like, well, yeah, so does Alyssa.
What do you think? What do you think?
I get it. I mean, I understand. But you have a lot of with all this racial stuff that's been going on lately, like you know, the whole Black Lives Matter movement and all the riots and stuff like that. It's like really stirred up the racism in a lot of white people, you know, especially like here in the South. And I think that they're all like a lot of these racist people secretly have like this affliction for him, you know.
Affection.
Affliction.
So you think that could have been a Freudian slip. So do you think that, I mean, do you think it's just all about race, though? Do you think it's all about just that they don't like, you know, different races, black people, Mexicans? I mean, do you think that's what that's all it's about?
Yeah, I mean, like, well, his whole, all the things he keeps saying about, like, sending the Mexicans out of the country and building a wall and stuff like that, I think a lot of, like, people here in the South will agree with that.
Well,
like,
it's not just in the South, though. I mean, it's all over the country. He has support all over the country. I mean, I guess you could say, hey, most of it might be in the South, considering that the guy's from he's about as New York City as you're going to get.
I would say South and Midwest if I had to take my guess.
Right, and that's why he's so popular in Iowa right now. And, you know, too, I think really what it is that people are just, there's a lot of people out there that are just frustrated. And he and really that's what it is. I mean, he does speak his mind, so much so that he says the most idiotic things that he can possibly say. Like yesterday or 2 days ago when he said that his people or his supporters would vote for him even if he shot somebody on Fifth Avenue. You know, like, these are the type of things that you don't think a candidate would say. But then again, at the same time, it's like I think that's why people like him, because he's kind of like the uncandidate, right? He's not saying all this kind of like political mumbo jumbo. He just speaks his mind, and people really respond to that. But is that really what we need? That's the question.
No,
he's the outward extension of people's like hidden racism.
That's what I just said. I just literally said that.
Did you?
Yeah.
I just walked in from taking the dog back in the house, but that's people are still racist deep down, but they know you can't be that way in public. You can't say that because it's not politically correct anymore. He brings that out in people. He's their outward expression of their racism and their bigotry and their intolerance. And I saw this thing today that summed it up perfectly, that shows just how far some people have come and just how far some still have to go. Anybody that supports him, I still think, has a long way to go as far as, civility and...
Yeah. I just really want to understand where people come from on it. I really do. I really don't want to sit here and think that just people are just because they're racist.
Well, they won't admit it. I mean, that's not the reason why. It's because X, Y, and Z. But really, there are people out there that just blindly follow him, it seems like.
Yeah.
People that don't, they don't really tell you about what his plans are with anything. It's just, yay, Trump, get the brown people out of our country. And that's what it seems like it's based on. I haven't heard one person who supports Trump actually give me any facts about what he stands for, what he's running for, anything.
Well, here's another thing about Trump is that, he started out saying a few things, but what now has happened is that he is definitely just tells this group of people really what they want to hear. I mean, that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
I mean, he's just saying, like the Paris attacks happened, and then all of a sudden everything shifted from talking about Mexicans to talking about Muslims.
Yeah.
And you had that scene in South Carolina. I think this was in the last 2 weeks also, that he was kicked out, this Muslim woman, American, who's a flight attendant, was standing silently with her husband in the middle of the rally in South Carolina, which is one of the early primary states, and she was wearing a Star of David, and she just sat there silently and wearing something on her shirt, like "I come in peace" or something like that. I don't quite remember what it was that it said, but people were just yelling at her, telling her to get out, and security escorted them. And I heard also too, like we were talking about this last month about this Black Lives Matter protester that went in there, and the same thing happened. And I don't really want to sit here and compare Donald Trump to Hitler, because I don't think he's as smart as Hitler.
Don't want to give him that much credit.
I don't think he could get the following.
Right.
Because Hitler obviously had to have a following to accomplish what he did.
Right. But in Weimar, Germany, which was the republic that preceded the Nazi regime, you had this kind of a situation where you had basically fighting in the streets between the ultra right and the ultra left, the communists and basically the Nazis, the fascists. And the same thing was happening at Hitler rallies, where a communist or somebody would go in, start yelling something, and they would, the SA, the stormtroopers would bash their heads in and remove them out of the hall. And this kind of stuff, especially now when you mix in like the Black Lives Matter protests and what's going on there, it's starting to really remind me of that situation. It's not necessarily that we're going into like the new Third Reich, although I'm sure there's some people that would debate that.
Yeah.
But it really is starting to kind of worry me and remind me just how politically polarized we are, where people are literally, if are people going to really start just like we're going to have street fights?
Well, and
I
that's
hope so.
That's the thing that scares me about it is that
Rob has a katana.
If you get
Rob does have a katana.
If you get people that riled up and that separated, then somebody is going to swoop in and capitalize on it.
Yeah,
and it's just a dangerous setup.
And we were talking before that we started the show, just like that. Alyssa was saying she felt like Bernie Sanders was going to get nominated, and I was thinking I could not see a more like total polar opposites than Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. I mean, like Hillary Clinton, at least she would be somewhere in the middle, even though she's more on the left-hand side. But you think about like Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump. I mean, there'd be a wide gulf in between those two if they were the candidates for
it will
president
divide
in
this
2016.
country. It'll divide it straight down the middle.
Truly. What do you think, Luke?
Let's keep rolling.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's take a break here. Guys, we're going to have on Seriah Azkath from the podcast Where Did the Road Go? And we're going to drop the politics for a little while and talk about ghosts and goblins and aliens.
Yay!
and hopefully Satanists as well. And and some Kundalini. And some metal for you, Luke.
Yes.
All
Best show ever.
We're going to take a break here. Break for us, but the joys of editing, you will hear it automatically from Samurai Rob. I'll be right back on Conspirinormal.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, we're back on Conspirinormal. And a few months ago, back when we first got on the IPBN, I was listening to the show one day in the morning, and as I was kind of getting ready, and I turn on the stream, and I just hear these three guys talking about aliens and alien abduction and Whitley Strieber and talking about how it had things to do with altered states of consciousness and other such oddities. And I thought to myself, man, these guys are like right up my alley, because as everybody knows, this is the kind of stuff we talk about on this show. And I kind of did a little bit of research and found out that the show was called Where Did the Road Go? And started listening to the show pretty religiously. And we have on the line the host of that show, Seriah Azkath. And Seriah, thanks for coming on Conspirinormal.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. Big fan of the show. I really enjoyed it. It's become like one of my staples now to listen to.
Awesome.
You're really prolific, like now, especially you're doing all these midweek podcasts and all this stuff. So you're putting out like 2 or 3 podcasts, I think, a week.
just 2 so far.
Yeah. It's go ahead.
The thing is, it's a for me to have a guest on. I want to know their stuff. I want to sit down, read their book, and I'm doing a lot of other stuff as well. So it's I don't want to do 5 shows a week because I won't be able to do that, and the quality will go down.
Yeah, I feel the same way about what we do too. Usually with guests, I try to get as much of the book read as possible.
Yeah,
and to try to kind of understand where they're coming from. So yeah, I hear you. I mean, we do this show sometimes about bi-weekly, and then sometimes we'll do it weekly. It just depends on who we have on and how long it takes me to read certain books. Most books are fairly short, so you can kind of read them within a good amount of time.
Until you get to the 500-page epics.
Oh yeah, I know. I've had a couple of those before. Absolutely, like Robert Sullivan's. I think his was around about that same amount. So I kind of had to pick and choose the stuff I wanted to talk about to try to kind of understand it and grasp it. So I totally understand where you're coming from on that.
I ended up having to split Chris O'Brien into 2 interviews because there was no way I had enough time to finish his book before the show.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, also the Steph Young interview that you just put out, that was in 2, but I think that's because there's just so much to talk about. I think her books are pretty short, as I understand.
I mean, she sends them to me on Kindle, and the Kindle thing said it took about 3 hours to read the whole book.
Right.
So it's not a lengthy book, but she just packs. It's just constant information from front to back.
Yeah, Luke's also good about reading all the books for the show too.
Yeah, every one of them, every page, every time.
Well, Seriah, what I wanted to start talking to you about, man, is like kind of like, you know, how did you become? What's your background, and how did you become interested in kind of like these weird topics that you talk about on the show, and we talk about here on this show a lot?
Well, I was always interested in the stuff. Like when I was a kid back in the 70s, you know, there was In Search of course, and just anything I could find on the, you know, Bigfoot, UFOs, Atlantis. I mean, they were the big things back then. It wasn't, you know, so subdivided.
Right.
And anything I could find, I found interesting. To me, it didn't, you know, it wasn't, to me, an astronomer should be studying UFOs, you know, or an archaeologist should be looking for Atlantis. And I didn't understand why they weren't. And so I just, you know, I eventually started getting interested in things like magic and studying people like Aleister Crowley. And it just kind of all tied together as I encountered new stuff over the years. Like I got tired of UFOs for a while because it seemed like there was nothing really new coming out until I encountered Whitley Strieber's stuff.
Right.
And that kind of got me far more interested. Then I found Jacques Vallée, and I was just like, wow, all right, you know, and John Keel and all this stuff. And I was just like, wow, this is completely different than I thought it was. You know, that simple explanation of extraterrestrials coming to Earth simply didn't work anymore for me.
Yeah, it's really the same here. I kind of was in like the 90s, like the X-Files age, which incidentally premieres tonight again.
Yeah.
So, it was, to me, it was like, it had to have been all nuts and bolts. Like they were coming from another galaxy or another planet. A lot of that was really big at that time, like guys like Stanton Freeman. And then I read a lot, like I had read Communion back when I was like 12 years old, 12 or 13. And I remember it just scared the hell out of me. And so I kind of just put it away, you know, and always in the back of my mind. But really it was something like the Mothman prophecies that was a big change, because I read that about 2001 when the movie came out. That got me thinking in a lot different level about it. I've never actually read Vallée stuff, but I am familiar with his work and where he comes from on it. Yeah, absolutely.
Keel I actually came across because he was writing for Fate magazine, and he very quickly became my favorite columnist there. And then I started going, you know, I need to read his books.
Yeah, I've only read Mothman Prophecies. I haven't read any other, like what was this other one, like Our Haunted World or something like that? Yeah,
there's our Haunted Planet, I believe. There's Disneyland of the Gods.
I love
Operation
that title.
Trojan Horse. And some of them have different titles, like the Eighth Tower was one, but it's been it's renamed as something else now and been republished, and I forget what the name is.
Well, what was it about Communion that really grabbed you, that particular book? I mean,
it's a good question. I think it was just the you know, part of it's that Whitley's a storyteller.
Yeah.
And so he can really make you feel what he was experiencing. And of course that works against him in a way, because people will be like, well, he's a storyteller, he's making it up. I don't believe he made it up. I think this stuff really happened to him. I think it really scared the crap out of him. It definitely wasn't a good business move.
No, it wasn't.
But I think that's what kind of gripped me, is that, you know, I could really feel what he was experiencing from the way he wrote. When I got to Transformation, I started realizing that some of his experiences were very similar to experiences I had, but I didn't have the UFO imagery around them.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about those experiences, because you did a whole show back in, I believe, May or June of last year.
Yeah, something like that.
And you were talking about, this is one where you didn't have a guest, and he was your co-host, Luke at the time.
Yep.
That you guys were talking about some of your Kundalini experiences, and kind of like this awakening that you had when you were younger. And first of all, kind of explain Kundalini and what exactly that is for those of us that are in our audience that might not know.
Well, if people are familiar with it at all, they're usually familiar with Kundalini yoga. And it's essentially meant, it's an energy force that kind of is at the base of your spine.
And in Kundalini yoga, you're trying to raise it up through your chakras to your crown chakra above your head, and then bring it down. There's like two energy currents, one on either side of the spine. But for me, I had no idea what it was. It just started affecting me. There's what's called morbid Kundalini arousal, and that's when it just wakes up on its own, and you have no control over it. And that's what happened to me when I was like 12 or 13 years old, and it caused me an enormous amount of pain, and it made me think I was losing my mind. And I'd go to all these doctors, and there was nothing physically wrong with me, but I'd be in enormous amounts of pain. And it wasn't till it was something I had written for, some book catalog I had written for out of Fate magazine, and it showed up with an article on Kundalini, and I'm reading it going, oh my God, this is everything I'm experiencing. And so I, got the book, and it was kind of a new age type of book, but it had enough in there to point me in the right direction and make me realize, yes, this is what I've been experiencing for the last 8 or 9 years, and had no idea what it was.
What kind of pain? Like what would happen? Like how would you feel when this started?
Well, the pain would usually be around chakra areas, which, if that hadn't happened to me, I'd probably say chakras were just kind of something, that you could focus on, maybe sort of create in your energy field. But the pain was always around chakras. So maybe they do have some kind of empirical existence. But it really felt like someone was taking a burning hot knife and stabbing me with it and twisting.
Whoa. Like kind of in your spine, or like
yeah, usually in the spine, occasionally in the stomach. So I went to a lot of stomach doctors while they tried to figure out why I had these horrible stomach pains, but there was nothing physically wrong with me. I was extremely healthy.
So when you had these, you would go to the doctor and they would tell you that there was nothing physically wrong with you.
Right.
And then, but you would keep experiencing these things. Now, did it eventually stop?
No.
So you still have this even today?
Yeah, every once in a while. The pain is not so bad now because I've learned how to get the energy moving. The pain comes apparently from blocks, and they're sort of blocks in your head. It's stuff you haven't dealt with or whatever. And when it hits one of those chakras that corresponds with those blocks, that's when you get the pain.
Okay.
And I've actually blacked out from the pain before.
Wow.
And I have a very high pain tolerance. I think the only thing that's ever come close is I had an abscessed tooth once. And that was probably the closest I've ever had to actual Kundalini pain.
Now, is this something that could cause like electrical interference?
Oh, yeah.
Like,
yeah, definitely.
Could you like turn, like you'll hear about this from time to time about the people that can turn street lights off, which is really weird.
Sliders, I think is the name for them.
Is that something that you've done before?
Oh yeah, absolutely. On both small scales and big scales. And the irony in this is I make a living fixing computers.
Right.
And
doing radio stuff too. So you're around all kinds of equipment. Yeah.
So luckily over the years I've learned how to balance out the energy so it doesn't generally screw stuff up. Like a few times this week I've had problems. Last night when I was on the air, my tablet was just going crazy every time I touched it. And I'm going, come on, I need to put this in my playlist. And it's going, oh, now I'm overheating. I'm like, you're not doing anything.
Wow.
That's really odd, too, because I was just looking up that phenomena last night and reading about it.
Really?
Yeah.
Like electrical interference from the body?
With lights.
Oh, the street lights.
Oh, yeah,
with street lights.
Yeah.
See, I didn't even know that was a thing, but I have a friend who, like, they used to happen all the time whenever she was around. Like, they would just blink out.
Well, if you look at Kenneth Ring's work when he studied near-death experience, people who had near-death experiences and UFO abductions, one of the common elements is they'll have both electrical interference and Kundalini after the experiences.
So how did this all relate when you started studying like occult stuff like Aleister Crowley? How did that relate to that? And we're kind of smiling in here because Crowley has to come up on this show like at least once a month. So I'm really thinking about if Rob could get like a soundboard of just like Ozzy Osbourne saying "Mr. Crowley" every time somebody.
I was going through this past week, and I'm really regretting that.
So how did this? I mean, how did that relate?
They were actually completely separate things.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand. I had a friend who was into Wicca,
Yeah.
And I was kind of hesitant to look into it. And she was like, no, there's nothing bad here. It's just a nature religion. And I started reading up on it, and I said, well, this is kind of interesting. I wonder if this stuff actually works. And then I did more research and found out, so this isn't actually what it's pretending to be. This isn't necessarily an ancient religion, because Wicca was created by Gardner and with the help of Crowley and MacGregor Mathers and stuff.
Right.
They kind of put together the current version of Wicca. I mean, some of it's folk magic, but a lot of it came from Crowley. So then I started looking into Crowley. I also had a friend who was really into Crowley and kept recommending I read his stuff. So I read his autobiography, and I was pretty impressed.
It's pretty light reading, you know.
Yeah, it's only like 1,000 pages.
And I'm sure it's all about sex and
No, not
drugs.
really. No, it goes all over that. I mean, because he was like he did mountain climbing.
Yeah.
He was a champion mountain climber. He had a pretty screwed up childhood. You know, he was raised in a very strict religious sect, and
Plymouth
he rebelled
Brethren.
against
Yep.
it. What was that?
Plymouth Brethren.
Yeah, the Plymouth, and they had broken into two sects while he was there over some minor little disagreement, and he just started questioning all the stuff, which got his mother naming him the Beast because he always asked questions. And so he kind of took that proudly, and that stuck with him obviously the rest of his life. But yeah, the book doesn't have a lot about sex in it, honestly. It's just his life from beginning to whatever point he wrote the book. All kinds of different experiences. But what I liked is that he kind of took magic as a science. He would always say the method of science with the goal of religion. Because his whole thing was about communion with the holy guardian angel, which he defined as your higher self. So every aspect of magic, white magic, would be trying to contact your higher self and understand your true purpose.
Why do you think he gets such a bad rap?
Oh, because he did some pretty horrible things here and there.
Yeah.
And he liked to encourage people with the whole beast thing. Like, he preyed upon people's ignorance sometimes. One of my favorite stories with him was that he when he bought the castle at Loch Ness, that Jimmy Page later bought, he put a sign up, and I forget exactly what the sign said, but it was something, and it said, beware of, and then it had this long word in another language. So everyone's thinking he's some kind of demon, and it's patrolling his land, and they're all freaking out, and really what the word translated to was nothing.
That's awesome.
So he was a massive practical joker.
Yeah. He also had a ton of intelligence ties too. Like, Ian Fleming was an associate of his.
Yep.
And Fleming apparently, I think not Fleming, but another author that was kind of in the same mix put him a character in one of his books that was based on Crowley.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's good and bad there. But he definitely, I mean, he was a very accomplished person. He did a lot of different stuff. And, it fascinated me because I really liked the way he approached things and the way he looked at things.
Yeah.
It was very practical.
My opinion on him and being someone that has never read his works directly, I just have this view of him not as this great beast, he's kind of the bugaboo, especially among really of lack of a better term, evangelical Christian circles. He's right. The root of all evil. Aleister Crowley is the one behind Miley Cyrus and all these people that are on the popular culture now. But I just look at him and I just think he's kind of a sad character because there was this very charlatan-esque thing about him, and he did die. Just kind of a sad drug addict, really.
Yeah, and he was a drug addict because that's what they prescribed from. I think it came from the mountain climbing. He started developing some breathing issues around 1900, and what they prescribed for that was opium, and he got heavily addicted to it.
Right, and he was addicted to heroin, and
and a lot of this stuff they were prescribing as medicine at the time.
Yeah, that's true, because they didn't really know kind of the effects of it. It was very.
Coke had cocaine in it, so
it was very common to do that. Didn't he write a book called Confessions of a Drug Fiend?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. And then he had what was that abbey that he had in Thelema Abbey at that island in Italy? Yeah. This is a digression. Have you ever heard the internet rumor that Barbara Bush is his daughter?
Yes. Totally not true, but it was funny.
Well, you can put Crowley and Barbara Bush side by side. I mean, it does kind of look like Crowley wearing a wig, but maybe that's because Barbara Bush is evil too. You never know.
Yeah, could be.
But one thing that I find interesting about Crowley and what I've always just found fascinating is the character of Lamb.
Yes,
and that's one of the things that's pointed to, especially a lot of because I've kind of come from kind of an evangelical Christian background with this stuff. Guys like L.A. Marzulli, I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. He talks a lot about the Nephilim, but he also talks about Crowley and the character of Lamb and just how much it looks like a gray alien. And that's something that's always fascinated me. And I think that for me was, there was a book called Report on Communion. And I remember actually reading this back in, but at the same time I read Communion, I was probably about 13 years old at that point. And I'm reading this kind of stuff. And, I remember them talking about that. And that was one of the things that I think later on when I looked at it really made me think, there's something a lot more to this grays thing than they just come from another planet or another solar system or something.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, I had interviewed someone about Crowley who had done a page called Crowley for President, I think it was. Crowley 2012. And it was a pretty amusing page just saying, essentially Crowley would have qualified as maybe a libertarian.
Yeah, he really would have. And so would have Jack Parsons.
Yes.
One of his little acolytes there.
Yep.
He was, his stuff was, he did a lot of political writings and his stuff was very libertarian viewpoint.
And so, I had this guy on the show and we had talked about Lamb and he had said that Lamb was apparently a self-portrait of Crowley. Now, I don't know if he was right or not, because I've heard a lot of other stories revolving around Lamb. And yeah, it definitely has that similarity to the gray alien. But you have that all throughout our culture. I mean, you look at the fairy stories and all this other stuff. I mean, the similarities are there. Like this stuff has been with us forever.
Right.
Even one of the things I've been noticing, like I'll watch Ghost Adventures. It's one of the few shows like that I'll watch just because they amuse me sometimes.
Yeah, right.
And they have some kind of neat equipment. And one of the things that I've noticed is they'll do these, they'll use like the Xbox Kinect equipment to determine if there's a shape in the room they're not seeing. And if it ever comes up with a shape, it's always small. And I'm always like, why is it always small? And does this connect with the whole fairies, elves, grays type of archetype? Because they're almost always small.
Right. That's interesting. I never thought about that before.
Which just lends credence to the idea that maybe the same thing is behind all this different phenomena.
Well, I want to ask you this, Seriah. Do you think that this phenomenon, like the fairies and now the alien abduction, the alien contact experience, do you think that it's the same phenomenon, that it's just masked itself in different masks as humanity has developed?
Oh, absolutely.
Because when we were in an agrarian culture, you can definitely see like the fairies, the people of the woods, and now we've come because there's like industrial, post-industrial culture, and you can definitely see these, like the aliens coming to us and bringing us these dire warnings. Do you think that there's something there to that?
Oh, I think absolutely. I have no doubt that they're the same phenomena. I think that whatever it really is, we can't actually interact with on a direct level. So we have to put some kind of mask on it. Like, for instance, we encounter it and imagine it's just some kind of anomalous energy. And our brain has to give us some kind of identification for that anomalous energy. And it just stretches and it goes, alien,
Yeah.
Because you see, like after Communion and Missing Time were printed, and became bestsellers, especially Communion, you saw the gray alien archetype a lot more, but only in countries where Communion had been published. And that says to me, it's, either A, people are making it up, which I don't, obviously some people are, but most people I think are very honest with their experiences. I think that it creates that mask that they're wearing because the brain can now jump to that mask that it's familiar with.
Well, one thing I found fascinating too is that in the 1940s and the 1950s, when the aliens would show up, they would usually, you didn't have these grays. It'd usually be like these Nordic characters.
Yeah. Yep.
And they would come and they would send these dire warnings about, the atomic bomb, and you need to change your ways before you destroy your planet. Mm-hmm. And in Streeper's account and in others' accounts, by then, this is the 1980s, in the 90s, there's more of this emphasis on climate collapse.
Yeah,
environmental collapse, that this is going to happen, and this is your warning. And it's like they're just so to me that sent up a red flag, because I'm just like, that is reflecting our concerns.
Well, that's kind of how I've always sort of looked at it. Is it's maybe the whole phenomena is a projection of ourselves. Not just the appearance, but their nature
or
in general.
at least some aspect of it is a mirror to us.
Right.
Right. Yeah, it's utterly fascinating. One of the things I did, I had on, this is one of the first shows that Rob was with us for. This is back like at the end of 2014. I had on two people that were experiencers. And I like to use that word in like alien abductees, because really to me,
sure,
it's really contact experience. Like alien abduction, I think is become, I hate the term. I've come to really hate it, because that really does imply that, hey, they're physically coming and taking you. Yes. And I don't think that's really what's taking place. Although I'm sure there's some older researchers that would probably disagree with that. But I had on these two guys. One was Michael Carter, and he comes at it he's a Unitarian minister. And he comes at it from a very kind of like a new age kind of viewpoint, that the aliens are our friends and they want us to join them in the sky and to take us into the Federation. And then I had another guy named Guy Malone, who is an evangelical Christian, who sees it very much as a negative point of view, mm-hmm. and sees them all as demons. And it was a very civil discussion, but I kind of realized through that almost it's like your point of view kind of determines what they are for you in a way.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I think how you approach the phenomena determines what it is and how it responds to you.
And that's something that I've really gotten out of your show listening, is that, I was very much, when I started this show, I was very much that like all this kind of experience was all just demonic, and that's all it was. And lately, I've kind of gotten away from that. I still think there might be an element there, but I've kind of just thought maybe it's just an experience. It's just experiential.
There's also the fact that human beings are both good and bad. Each of us have our good sides and our bad sides. None of us are perfect,
right?
But we expect these beings to be one thing or the other. We expect them to be all good or all bad. And when you look at the fairy stories, the fairies could be good to you or they could be bad to you, depending on what you did to them and how you were behaving.
Yeah, I mean, fairies could be really mean in some of the lore. Like there was one story that I watched, this documentary about fairies, and there was this one story that they said that this guy saw two fairy women bathing, and they basically cursed him. And when he went home and went to sleep, he woke up the next morning and he was blind for the rest of his life.
I remember that one.
Like, that's pretty, I mean, that's pretty hardcore. I mean, like you think about fairies, you think of Tinkerbell, but no, they're pretty mean little things, really.
Right. It's like mermaids and sirens.
Yeah.
Like,
but
they're kind of the same thing, but different.
You do have fairy stories though where they help people and where they give people these amazing gifts and things like that. So there's definitely a two-sided phenomena, and they may just be complicated like people are.
What do you think about the ayahuasca experiences?
I think it's deeply connected. I think that you're accessing the same realm that these things are coming from. I think that shamans have been doing it. I think when you work with magic, you're doing it because really, magic, you're doing a couple things whenever you're working with magic. You're altering your consciousness for one, but you're also trying to alter that part of your unconscious that helps create the reality around you.
Have you ever worked closely with any shamans or had any experiences like
No.
that?
No. I've never actually done a drug in my life.
Oh, okay.
I've had enough weird experiences without them.
Yeah. You know, in the ayahuasca experience, I mean, obviously I've never done it or been close to that, but we did have someone on that talked about that. Mm-hmm. And, you know, people see reptilians, they'll see grays, they'll see praying mantis creatures, all the same kind of stuff that is in that alien contact experience. But another aspect of it, and I think Luke could talk a little bit more to this than I can, is this idea that you are confronting your inner demons and like you're being pulled apart and basically to be put back together. And that's very similar to the alien abduction experience where you're put on this slab and you're poked and you're prodded, the anal probes or whatever, sperm taken, ovum taken, and it's almost like you're being torn apart and then put back together. So it's very similar. Can you want to talk about, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, whenever you read into Buddhism, the Dharma, they talk about like the 9 levels of hell, and that's essentially like the same thing. They talk about the soul being tore apart over and over again, and that's basically what's happening is to stripping your all of these negative things that's accumulated like on your conscious.
It's a confrontation of all your regret and guilt, and
right. And,
it's all your illusions.
Mm-hmm.
I have no regret or guilt.
Alyssa is perfect.
No,
I do think that there is an intelligence behind it. I don't think it's all us. Yeah. I think that we definitely put the face on it because I don't think we can interact with it directly. But I think when we're experiencing it here, they're coming here. When we're going into an altered state with ayahuasca, DMT, stuff like that, we're going closer to where they are, wherever that may be. You know, tuning into their reality a little bit. There's the other thing with abduction accounts is occasionally you do have physical evidence.
Yeah.
And that's the monkey wrench in it. If there wasn't the physical evidence, if there was never anything physical that someone could point to, you know, scuffed shoes, burn marks on the ground, things like that, you could say, well, yeah, it's a psychological altered state experience. But sometimes you have multiple witnesses. Sometimes you have physical evidence. And plus you have things like implants that are not easy to explain away.
Yeah, we have L.A. Marzulli in our theme song talking about how implants are real. Yeah. So what do you think about that, though? Do you think that, because there is this idea about apports, and I mean like and I think there's similar things in fairy lore too.
Yes. Yeah. Obviously it's more of a technological level now, but I mean, the research I've seen done on these things is definitely puzzling. It doesn't prove anything, but it's definitely a mystery. It's hard to prove anything in this field because it's so, it's so non-physical for the most part. You know, you find an odd thing in your body, you can say, yes, this is odd. We can't tell you how it got there or what it is, and it might be giving off radio waves, but that doesn't prove that it was put there by an alien intelligence.
Could be the government.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You never know.
That's what I was going to ask you about too, is like, you know, mind control experiments, these type of things that have happened, and we know that those have happened through like MK Ultra, and I have to wonder sometimes with some of this alien abduction stuff whether there is that aspect is there.
Oh, I think it is. I definitely think it is. I mean, they've used the UFO phenomena right from the beginning for all kinds of stuff, whether it be something pretty obvious like covering up experimental aircraft, to, I think, messing with people's heads and seeing, how they can affect people. They've also been monitoring UFO groups. I mean, Jacques Vallée wrote a whole book called Messengers of Deception talking about this stuff, how they've used UFO groups and stuff to spread propaganda and other stuff.
Betty and Barney Hill is one that comes to mind. Recently, I've kind of looked back into that, and I really think that there was some mind control stuff happening there.
During the experience or after?
I think during and possibly after, too.
How come?
Well, one of the things that gets me is that, okay, you have early 1960s. Granted, they're in the North, New England, but they are also they were civil rights organizers. And I feel like they would have been, as a mixed couple, too, at that time. There's a certain amount of stress that went into that. But I feel like they would have been possibly targets by the establishment. And easily probably to mess with them in order to possibly, ruin the cred of the civil rights movement, or looking into the possibility that there were leftists in the civil rights movement, all this kind of stuff.
Certainly a possibility that
they would have left themselves, they really would have left themselves, I think, open for being targeted on that. And I can't remember the name of the guy, but there was a author, and Nick Redfern actually writes about this. So I'm kind of pulling a lot of this from him. There was an author that wrote the book Interrupted Journey, also had written a book about this town in France that got infected by this. They all ate this poisoned bread or something, and they all started just tripping balls and having these like serious hallucinations. And he was actually told by somebody high up in the CIA, he was actually told that he was going to, after he wrote that book, he was going to get all the skinny on the mind control, the MK Ultra mind control stuff. And Barney and Betty, then he wrote, but that's the book he came out with, was The Interrupted Journey. So it seems kind of odd that, he's talking all about this mind control, but then he comes out with that book too.
Yeah, but you'd have to wonder what they did exactly. Yeah. Especially because it is so much a template for experiences other people have had.
Right. And it makes you wonder too, though, does this phenomenon follow then that template? Because people read it, it goes into the popular culture.
Could be.
And they just pick up on it. It's kind of like the Black-Eyed Kids stuff.
Yeah.
That's one that I've found fascinating. But what do you think about the Black-Eyed Kids? Do you think that there's something to it? Do you think it's all, or do you think it's internet rumor?
It's really hard for me to say. I want to say it's all internet rumor.
Yeah.
Having talked to what's his name? I'm blanking on his name.
David Weatherly?
David Weatherly.
Yeah.
He seems very certain that these are not internet rumors, that these are real people. He's talked to tons of people who have had these experiences. And I feel like, with a lot of this stuff, I feel like, I wasn't there. I don't know. I don't have the right to say, oh, they're making it up. It sounds like something that people are making up. It doesn't mean that they are. So I've always had that hesitation with the Black-Eyed Kids, although it does kind of mimic the Men in Black encounters in a lot of cases. A lot of the atmosphere to it is very, very similar.
Right. Yeah, it is.
When we were talking about things mimicking, too, you got to consider the very first case of a UFO causing a car to stop, killing the power in a car, was in a story, not an actual event. And after that story, you started seeing that actually happening.
Well, it's like the flying saucers that was originally used to describe the way they moved.
Yeah.
And then people started seeing saucer-shaped crap.
Right. I've heard stories of, like, the old, like, back in the 50s, 60s, the UFO movies. Like, that was, like, a conditioning for the population. Like, they knew about it, and they were just trying to, like,
break them in.
Yeah,
Break 'em in
like
easy.
like yeah, like kind of giving people an idea of what was going on, but not really, like still kind of fantasizing, what it was, but they had an idea of what was going on.
Yeah, there's this whole thing about I'm not sure who's like the author behind it or whatever, but there's this whole thing about a theory that science fiction comes out first and then like lays the groundwork, and then what science fiction actually says like later is like replicated in real life.
Well, it's like self-fulfilling prophecy. You see.
Right.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
archetypes.
Well, look how much stuff from Star Trek is now technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense because hey, they had a good idea. Can we do that?
Right. But the interesting thing about the Black-Eyed Kids is that, again, the first time, I've seen the whole thing with just the solid black eyes. I've seen that in popular culture, science fiction especially, because you had, the X-Files, right? The alien virus that would infect the eyes, and they went totally black. The show Supernatural, that was, the demon's eyes were completely
That's
black
usually
every single
like
time.
demon possession.
Yeah,
The
in
grudge
popular
movies.
TV.
and then all of
now.
a sudden, people start an emphasis on that they start seeing these kids with solid black eyes. So if it's a real phenomenon, then maybe it's just mimicking what it thinks we expect, I guess.
Well, and it kind of ties back to a Crowley-esque sort of a thing where, belief, enough people believe in something, and that's all it takes to manifest.
Yeah.
It's all energy or.
Yeah, well, I mean, everything around us is just energy. I mean, what we're seeing isn't really there. It's an interpretation from our senses, and our senses are extremely imperfect.
Right.
Our senses get, just a little bit of data and fill in the rest. Our brain just fills in the rest to give us the image that we see and the perception we have of reality, but it's so incomplete and it's so lo-fi.
That limits it.
Let's talk a little bit briefly about this is one of the topics I love when you talk about on the show. And you've had a lot of people on about this, about like ancient civilizations and this concept of quote unquote Atlantis. And like you've interviewed like John Anthony West, Laird Scranton, who we've had on this show. And, these are guys that really believe that there was this ancient civilization in the past that came and went. And what's your stance on that?
I think there's more than enough evidence to say that there was something very advanced in the past. How advanced is hard to say because, I mean, we can't use our technology as a marker. I mean, they may have been advanced in a completely different way than we are, and we wouldn't recognize it if they were.
Right.
But I think there's more than enough structures and things that we really, we still today, with the equipment we have, could not build the Great Pyramid the way it's built.
Yeah.
We can build smaller versions of it. But any engineer that looks at that's just like, I have no real idea how they did this, especially without giant cranes and all this other stuff. So they had to know something. They had to know something we didn't know in order to do that. And I suspect that was probably passed down from a civilization somewhere. I think that's where the stories of the Anunnaki come from. I think those were the survivors.
Yeah, and I think that's probably true. Besides, like the 12th planet stuff, the Sitchin stuff, which we don't really buy that.
No, neither do I. I think if I had to put money on what happened at the end of the Ice Age, I would lean toward the electric universe idea that Venus was a comet. And it came in close to the Earth.
This is the Velikovsky.
Yeah,
stuff.
Velikovsky originated it. But Velikovsky put it much later in time. The EU people put it back towards, the end of the Ice Age.
Right, because there's some evidence, I think, that a comet, we had a guy named R.J. von Bruning on the show, and he had an interesting theory that there was like a comet that hit Alaska somewhere around like 10,500 BC, and that could have caused definitely like cause a pole shift or something like that, and that civilization, whatever was around, was wiped out at that time.
Well, what I find interesting is, and Robert Schoch talks about this, although Schoch doesn't believe it was Venus, Schoch believes it was a massive solar flare, which is also a possibility.
Yeah.
But what's been found is that a lot of these ancient inscriptions are actually plasma outbursts. So, like, you see the man that's standing with, like, arms up, legs spread, and has the two dots on either side, and you see this in a lot of cultures. This is a plasma outburst. You could recreate this in the laboratory. And there's something like, I don't remember exactly how many, say there's 20 of them that you find in ancient cultures all over the world. And the only way they would have seen this is if something massive happened in the sky, whether it be a solar flare or a planet coming close and there was a thunderbolt type of situation. The only ones that are not seen in these ancient artworks are the ones that would have been deadly to see. So if someone was there and that form of radiation from these plasma outbursts hit, they would have died. So they couldn't have created those things.
I think Schoch's work is pretty compelling.
Absolutely.
Just the weathering on the Sphinx in and of itself. I mean, just the dating it to about, was it 7,000 BC? Much older than what they think what is traditionally thought.
Yeah, I think currently he pushes it back to 12,000 years ago, the end of the last ice age.
Wow. And
but I think 7,000 years ago is the conservative date he initially came up with.
And the Göbekli Tepe stuff is fascinating. Yeah. I mean, you really can't escape that because that has been cohesively dated at about 9,000 years ago.
Yeah, and you got Gadong Padang there down in Southeast Asia. And I believe Graham writes about that in the new book. I don't have his new book yet. But you have this pyramid, basically, that's been buried, and they're slowly excavating it, and that could be even older than Göbekli Tepe.
So we're actually finding this stuff.
Yeah.
And
a lot of it's going to be underwater. That's the other thing.
Yeah. Because of the sea levels.
We haven't really heard anything about the pyramid you just described.
Yeah.
We never really talked about that.
Oh, really? Yeah, they're getting a little bit of a pushback from the standard archaeological community down there, but they did get permission to keep working on it. So, I think they're claiming the dates could be 20 to 30,000 years old.
Wow.
Because it's something that's been built upon over and over. So they've always known there was something there, but it was only a few thousand years old. And then they started digging down and they found structures underneath and they were able to date some of the material there. And the dates just keep getting older and older.
And I was listening actually to one of your shows today. I think the last show that you were talking with Red Pill Junkie and Joshua Cutchin. And you guys were talking about this like Nazca lines, like designs that were found in Kazakhstan.
Right, yeah. I think there's some in Syria, too, if I'm not mistaken. Syria or Saudi Arabia, somewhere in that range, there's desert designs as well that have been discovered in the last couple of years.
That brings up a good question. Do you think there's anything to this idea that we invaded Iraq and what's going on in the Middle East with Syria, that's a way to find ancient technology?
I don't know about ancient technology. I can say fairly certainly that some people are using those invasions to loot priceless relics. And I know someone who was investigating that, but there's also what broke in the news last year was the whole thing with Hobby Lobby, and the people who run Hobby Lobby were doing just that. They were taking priceless relics from Iraq. They were hiring people to go in there and just steal these and loot the museums.
What?
Yeah.
Hobby Lobby?
Yep, the people who owned it.
Hobby Lobby is a disgusting corporation.
Isn't this the same people that want to something like support gay spouses or something like that?
No, they modified their health insurance plan for all of their employees, for the female employees, because they felt that birth control was against God and it was a form of abortion.
But hey, we don't shop at Hobby Lobby.
Yeah.
So
no. Yeah.
Everything is so expensive there. Why would you?
Chick-fil-A is in the same group with me.
But that's absolutely bizarre. I mean, were they getting it to sell like on the
For their
black
private
market
collections.
for their private collections?
I mean, the people who are running it are very rich, so it's not so much that they want it to make more money. They want it for, hey, look what I have.
Right.
And there was someone who was writing a book about it, and when they tried to publish the book, the publisher said, "You can't publish this. This is implicating a lot of very rich people. You're going to have to change it."
I really wonder if they're actually buying this stuff from ISIS, because that's one of the things that they do. They're on the antiquities market.
It very well could be, and that could be funding them for more, weapons and everything else they need.
That's crazy. That's a whole other show right there.
Wow.
But I want to talk about near-death experiences before we get into some juicy topics here. This is one that we have not covered really on this show, but I find it interesting that you cover it, but you also look at it in this kind of the same similar way of like the alien contact experience.
Right.
Because you see that as like an altered state.
It's that's because of Kenneth Ring's work.
Okay. I'm
he's
not really
the one
familiar with him.
He was a psychologist who was studying near-death experiences, and he wrote basically his publisher sent him a copy of Communion, and he said, I don't do UFOs. He's like, read it. And so he read it, and he realized, wow, some of the after effects Whitley Strieber was experiencing are identical to the after effects that some of these near-death experiencers were having. So he set out two groups with questionnaires and stuff like that, and a control group, and found that the people who have had near-death experiences and the people who have had alien abduction experiences have almost the exact same after effects. So I think that was the thing that finally broke me away from the nuts and bolts model of UFOs. Because I'm like, if this is true, there's no way these things can be physical nuts and bolts aliens, because what does that have to do with death?
Right. Yeah. And doesn't Strieber talk about, I don't know if it's in Communion, but I think it's some of the other books where he talks about seeing dead loved ones.
Mm-hmm. And Solving the Communion Enigma, one of the more recent ones he did, he talks a lot about that. He talks about people, seeing dead loved ones. Like there was a case with a fireball flies, in front of this house, and the parents are out front watching it. They're like, was that a plane? What just happened? They're talking about calling the police, and they go back in the house, and their very young kid comes downstairs, and he says, Danny was in my bedroom, or whatever the kid's name was, that their son who had passed. And they just kind of stopped, and they're like, what? And he's like, he just wanted me to tell you that he's okay and everything's fine.
Here's an interesting point that we've made before. I've made before on this show. But I really want to get your idea on this, is that I think sometimes we have these different categories that we put the paranormal in. We have ghosts, we have UFOs, we have Bigfoot, we have all these different categories and subcategories. But it seems to me the deeper that you go down this rabbit hole with this stuff, that they just always seem to overlap. Mm-hmm. Case in point, I had a guy on the show, Stephen LaChance, who talked about a haunting experience that he had in a house in Missouri, and written a couple books about it. And one book is about the hauntings that happened with him and another person, and another one is kind of like about the aftermath of it. In the second book, he relays this experience that he has where right after they leave the house, after having some weird psychic stuff, things moving in their house, him and his son leave the house, and they go driving down the road, and all of a sudden they see UFO in the field right next to him. And he just kind of like, pushed it away and said, I don't want to deal with two different phenomenon at the same time. And I remember just telling him on the show, I said, I think they may be connected. I think that, it's like one is not necessarily separate from the other.
I think it's the aliens.
Why do you think we kind of pigeonhole this stuff?
Because that's what it looks like. I mean, on the surface, it looks like different phenomena, but read through Strieber's stuff and you see he's had all those paranormal experiences, knocking on the walls, things moving. Right. And if you really want to get into high strangeness stuff, you pick up Hunt for the Skinwalker.
Yeah, I've read that. Yeah.
And there you have so much different stuff. You have cattle mutilation, you have UFOs, you have entity encounters, you have stuff disappearing and reappearing. I mean, just some of the weirdest possible stuff. Portals that they were watching open in the sky.
Yeah.
And assuming that they're telling the truth, again, we're with any of these testimonies, we have to trust that the person is telling us the truth as they know it. That's a lot of weird phenomena that's all tied together in one spot.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing that Kenneth Ring had come up with is he coined what he called the encounter-prone personality. And he said that some people are obviously more prone to having these experiences. And one of the common elements he found is that a lot of them were abused as children. So they had some kind of trauma in their young childhood. And I mean, you could speculate that maybe that's, if you're getting beaten as a kid, you're going somewhere else inside, to deal with it.
Yeah.
And this could be opening you up to that realm that these things inhabit. You're essentially entering an altered state of consciousness as a child without knowing you're doing that.
Right. That's an interesting point of view there.
Because it also seems like once that door is opened, it stays open. I mean, if you have an abduction experience, it's rare that that's it. It just other stuff starts following it.
Seriah, have you ever had a sleep paralysis experience?
My sleep paralysis experiences are weird.
Do tell.
I have never woken
They're all
up.
weird.
I've never woken up and been unable to move, like where I know I'm laying in my bed or whatever. What happens is I can't get out of a dream state. So I'll have lucid dreams a lot. Well, let me give you an example. One of the more recent ones that happened to me. I dreamed that I woke up and I was laying in bed and I said, okay, wonder what time it is. And I looked over at my clock and instead of numbers, there were just dots. And I went, oh, I'm still asleep. All right, wake up. And so I, again, dreamed that I woke up. And I looked over at the clock, and there were just dots. I'm like, oh, come on. And then I felt something move out of my bed and grab my leg. Ugh. Like it came up from inside the bed and just gripped onto my leg really hard. And I'm going, great. Because this happens in these experiences. And I'm like, all right, wake up. And so again, I wake up. Now I'm in a completely different bedroom. I'm like, okay, this isn't even my bedroom. And I'm struggling to get to that point of actual consciousness. Other times I'll be trying to wake up and I'll literally feel something grip me and pull me back down like being pulled underwater.
It doesn't sound very pleasant.
It's never been harmful.
Yeah.
It can be slightly scary when it happens.
Right.
But I'm getting to the point where I'm more curious as to what it is and less scared by it.
Right.
Because I don't scare easy to begin with. So it's kind of, I don't know if saying it scares me is really the right thing. It's frustrating.
Yeah, it's more like, it's almost more like an inconvenience in a way.
Like
freaking wake up already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had those. That's
different levels of dream states.
Yeah.
Where it's almost like the Inception movie, which was,
Yeah.
but still, you have these different levels and it is creepy. And you wonder if it's, like if there's something else involved in it. But at the same time, it's like, it's just, you're sleeping. And people, I still can't take control of those dreams. I wish I could. Where people are like having the waking dream and they're like, I can do whatever I want. Yeah. It's still always a weird ass dream for me.
The other day I had a dream that I was in a haunted house and I was with some little kid who was really sensitive and some woman who was recording it. And we were on the second floor and the kid goes, I can't go up to the third floor. I can't do it. And I said, oh, I'll go up to the third floor. And I started walking up the stairs, and I got hit with the most awful feeling I think I've ever felt. And I literally stopped on the stairs, and I was just like, whoa. And he goes, that's why I didn't want to go up the stairs. I'm like, gotcha. And then I continued up the stairs. And so then they followed me, and we're up on the third floor. And like I go into a bedroom, and the doors slam shut. And I open the doors, and they're gone. because they were on the other side. And I get this impression that this thing is telling me I can put you in another dimension. And I said, okay, all right. And I shut the door and I opened it again and they were back. I'm like, I think we need to leave before this thing gets really upset with us.
Wow.
But when I woke up that whole day, I was setting off electronics left and right.
Really?
So I don't know if it was because of the feeling I got that somehow set off the electrical interference, or if I actually interacted with something that set off the electrical interference.
Right, that could be an alien encounter, not an abduction, but that could be, that could be something that they put in your brain,
Could be.
Yeah,
you never know.
Alien, I think, is a pretty loose term. I really do.
I would say that whatever the intelligence is, it's clearly alien to us.
Right.
Yeah.
Not necessarily extraterrestrial, but it's so different to us that it is literally alien to our understanding.
Right. Could be government, but it's still alien to what we're used to. You go to sleep, you have a dream, you expect a certain thing. I think I've had that too, where it's been like really vivid and, like you can't really place where you are or who you are or what's going on. And I mean, people could argue that is a quote unquote alien encounter,
There's an interesting documentary called The Nightmare.
Oh yeah, seen it on Netflix. Yep.
Yeah,
I
thought that was really well done. We're actually going to do a show based around that and sleep paralysis at some point. But what I found interesting is that these people were experiencing sleep paralysis, which is generally fairly easily dismissed as something just in your head. What happens is your consciousness wakes up, but your brain is still in a dream state. So you can see things that aren't there. You can't actually move because when you're asleep, your brain kind of shuts off from the connection to the body, so you don't flail around and run while you're sleeping generally. So, I mean, from a scientific perspective, that makes sense. But these people were having experiences like this guy's sleeping next to his girlfriend, and she has these experiences. And after sleeping next to her, he started having these experiences. And how does that make sense? That shouldn't happen.
Yeah, that was strange. Right,
And
they tell him about it, and he starts having the experience. Yeah.
Yeah. And there were a few cases in there of things like that. Like I think one of the last ones they were talking about, the guy was laying there and he had the sort of nightmare hag experience, where something was sitting on his chest and he couldn't breathe. And the girl next to him woke up and looked over and saw a black cat with red eyes laying on his chest.
Yeah, that was crazy.
So I don't think it's so simple as just the brain not waking up completely. There may be, at least in some cases, something else going on.
Right. And I think what's happening is that is another form of altered state. It's putting you into that altered state, whether it's sleep paralysis or you're doing hallucinogens or you're doing meditation, whatever it is, you're going into that altered state.
And the big question becomes, are these things you're dealing with in the altered state entirely within you, or are you connecting to something else that is just taking that mask?
Right. And that's
your brain, our brains can do amazing things, like things we didn't even know that they could do. Tap into like subconscious weird stuff.
And that's how my question is this a manifestation of our doing? Is it our energy and intention that's creating it, or is there actually an external force?
Yeah. And when you have something like the woman waking up next to the guy and seeing the black cat at the same time he's having the nightmare hag experience, you would lean toward, okay, maybe there was actually something there affecting him. But you could also say that maybe he was psychically affecting her.
Yeah,
right.
That's another possibility too. Let's talk about something really juicy here.
Okay.
This will lead into our metal discussion with Luke. But let's talk about Satanism.
Okay.
Something we haven't covered too much on this show, much to Luke's chagrin. But
I will say I love what the Satanic Temple has been doing over the last year.
All the trouble it's been causing in society.
Yeah, well, the trouble against the religious fundamentalists.
Right.
You know, they put up the 10 Commandments on public property, and then they say, oh, well, if you can do that, then we'd like to donate this statue of Baphomet for it as well.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, that's in 2 locations now, right? Oklahoma City, and then there's one up north too.
Yeah, I think they
so.
tried to put it in Oklahoma City, but it didn't happen,
No,
so
I
they
believe
moved it
it's
to
there.
Detroit.
Oh, okay.
They're still trying with the Oklahoma one. There was
Yeah,
actually
they
a
are.
Hindu group as well that wanted to put a monument there, and they were saying, well, you can't do that. And it's like, well, then you can't have the 10 Commandments there. And I
Yep.
think someone actually vandalized the 10 Commandments, and the Satanic Temple came out and said, that's not okay. They have every right to put their stuff there as long as we can put our stuff there too.
Right.
Yeah. It's more like
Or
they're
they-
just trying to make a point.
Yes.
You know?
And they're doing it in such a great way because the average perception of the Satanic Temple is, oh my God, they're evil. And their point is so not that. You know, they made a coloring book for this Florida school because they were distributing religious pamphlets there. And they said, well, we have a religious pamphlet. And they put this coloring book out that's all about tolerance and accepting people for who they are.
Yeah.
But it had all these satanic overtones, and the people just flipped out. And they're like,
Oh,
oh
yeah,
no,
of course.
no religious pamphlets at all, you know?
Well, you have the LaVeyan Satanists that are more kind of like, it's kind of like religious atheism in a way. It's like
Yes.
atheism with just a little bit of
Hint of
ritual and
sarcasm.
ceremony and
Well-
quite a lot of sarcasm. Yeah.
That's us.
Yeah. You figure that LaVey created the Church of Satan. He was a cop in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And he would go out and see all these horrible crimes and these just terrible things happening to people. And those same people committing those crimes would go to church on Sunday. And he's like, what kind of hypocrisy is this? You can do whatever you want during the week as long as you go to church on Sunday? And that
Right.
kind of spawned him writing, the Satanic Bible, which is not a Bible about doing evil to people. It's very much like a very humanist, atheist type of way of being, of respecting other people and taking responsibility for your own actions. Like his argument would be, okay, it's totally okay to kill someone, but if you kill someone, there's going to be consequences, and you must stand up and accept those consequences. So if you go out and murder someone, you're probably either going to get killed yourself or end up in jail, and you can't shirk that off. You have to stand up and say what you did.
Be responsible for your actions.
Right. And
Yeah.
if most people were to say, well, I want to kill that person, but I don't want to go to jail, so I probably shouldn't kill that person, It's like Crowley once said, someone asked him, well, what if someone wants to learn magic to, learn how to kill someone with magic? And he said, well, by the time they get to the point where they could do that, they would know it was wrong to do.
Do you think that there are Satanists out there that like are real Satanists,
Like devil worshippers?
Yeah, that really worship Satan, and they do like animal and human sacrifice. Do you think that actually exists?
I'm on the fence about it. I've never seen any concrete evidence it exists. I wouldn't at all be shocked to find out it exists.
Right.
I don't think there's an organized group of people like that, but I'm sure that individuals spout off here and there. And
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely as individuals. As big organized groups, though, it's hard to say. I mean, you hear sometimes about, like, some of these haunted woods locations. I was just talking to Steph Young about this. And, people will see... I think one of the cases she talked about, there was these people walked into the woods and they found this whole area covered in blood, and they freaked out and they ran out of there and they got in their car. And when they looked back, they saw a bunch of people standing there in robes, and their assumption is, oh my God, we were just in the midst of a satanic cult.
Yeah, I think Steve Stockton has a similar story in his book.
Yeah. And so maybe that was the case. Maybe these people really were devil worshippers and doing something really nasty in the woods, or maybe you're dealing with a phenomena that's giving you what you expect. So you're turning and seeing these people in robes, but they're no more real than if you turned and saw a bunch of elves standing there. You're seeing an energy and you're projecting onto it what you think is there.
Kind of going back to the earlier part of the discussion there.
Right.
Like that you're just seeing like kind of, for lack of a better term, phantom Satanists in a way.
Sure. Sure.
Like there was the whole satanic panic thing in the 80s.
Yeah.
And so much of that, like the McMartin preschool case, later on in the
Memphis
90s with
3.
West Memphis 3, I mean, so much of that really was just there's so many miscarriages of justice and people going to jail and lives ruined over this whole thing. Yeah. And it makes you wonder, what's the boundary between just mass hysteria, which that was, and whether there's anything real, anything substantial to this stuff.
I can't think of any, like, and I could totally be wrong here, but I can't remember any cases of like huge satanic cults being busted for crimes.
Yeah.
Like we said, individuals, yes, you'll get the serial killer or whatever who was praising Satan and
Richard
doing
Ramirez,
all these rituals.
Yeah.
Right. But I can't think of any times where a group, was uncovered and thrown in jail because they were sacrificing people or children or whatever. Right. However, if these groups exist, they may be people who are in the upper echelon who can cover up their tracks fairly easily and aren't going to be bothered by the law enforcement.
We know that pedophile rings exist on like the upper echelon of society. We know that has happened.
Exactly.
Like was it the Lincoln, Nebraska, all that thing in the 80s that the Discovery Channel did a documentary about that was banned, but you can see it on the internet. And all this kind of stuff in the Dutroux affair in Belgium, we know all that exists, and there's documented cases of that kind of thing going on.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I'm sure it's pretty much I mean, the little bits you see come out of places like Washington, D.C., I'm guessing are the very tip of the iceberg, the stuff that actually makes it into the press.
Right. So I have to wonder, just like in the Satanic Panic, because people that were being accused of that were just, kids that listen to too many metal albums, or it was just mass hysteria. They're just normal people. So like you said, if it exists, it probably exists on the higher levels, like kind of like Eyes Wide Shut kind of stuff. Right.
Yeah. And then, they're going to be untouchable, which is why we've never seen a satanic cult get busted.
Right. Because it might go far up.
Yeah.
Well, to kind of do a little segue here from Satan into metal. We got, as I mentioned before, we got our resident metalhead, Luke, here.
Luke is ready.
He's really chomping at the bit to talk to you about some metal there.
Since 14 years old.
some metal there, Seriah. So you guys take it away.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess first of all, the first question would be, what subgenre do you focus on, or what's your favorite subgenre?
I don't know that I have one, honestly. I like a little bit of everything. I've been doing a metal radio show since 1994 called The Last Exit for the Lost.
Oh wow!
And when I took it over, it was called The Metal Cage. And I said, because it actually dates back to 1985 on the radio station I'm on. And so I took it over in 94, and I said, I don't want it to be called The Metal Cage. I don't really like the name. But I wanted to have more freedom in what I was playing, so it didn't have to strictly be metal. I wanted to be able to play stuff like Laibach, which is not metal, but it fits in that type of genre well enough because it's big, it's dark, it's militaristic. So I changed the name and then got, and I play everything from, say, Fields of the Nephilim, which gives the show its name, which is like gothic rock, all the way down to death metal and borderline like ambient noise type stuff.
Right on. Cool.
I tend to be fond of female vocalists.
Okay.
Although some of my favorite vocalists are not women. So, but if like I see a band and it's like, oh, female vocalist, I'll check that out.
Yeah, it's always interesting because you don't see that very often. It seems at post 2000, there's a lot more female screaming vocalists now.
Sure. I like girls who can actually sing though.
Yeah. So well, for me, sing and scream. That's kind of my prerequisite. But
I love Annika from who was in The Gathering originally. Now she has another project called The Gentle Storm. I think her voice is amazing. But at the same time, I like Karen Crisis a lot, and she's not much of a singer as much as a vocalizer.
Yeah, I could see obviously that you're on a whole different level, being a DJ all those times. For lack of a better term, I guess you would say DJ, right?
Oh yeah, totally DJ.
Okay, but yeah, Rob is also a metalhead.
Well, I've delved a bit. I don't know that I would say metalhead. Like I'm old school, like early '90s kind of hardcore.
See, I don't even consider that old school. Old school is like early '80s, the '70s.
I'm used to hanging out with a younger, like I hang out with a lot of 20-something-year-olds. So like,
fair enough. But a lot of the old stuff is coming back too. I mean, the sound Black Sabbath pioneered is now really popular again.
which is great.
Yeah.
Tons of thrash bands are coming up now that are actually good. You know, I mean, for a while thrash was shunned because it wasn't cool anymore.
Right. What are some of the thrash bands that have caught your attention?
Newer old ones coming back.
New ones.
Yeah. See, you ask me and I draw a blank. There's one out of Ohio that I really liked, and I'm completely, it starts with a V, and I cannot remember the name of the band.
Yeah.
Although I do think they're on a hiatus at the moment, unfortunately. I'm trying to pull up my music list here.
I totally feel you there. There's too many floating around in there to just recall at any moment.
Well, here's the problem, too. I mean, doing radio is a lot of fun. And back when I started, you'd get maybe 10 releases a week. So you had time to sit down, listen to them, and you'd be like, oh, this is cool. All right, I'll play something else. I like this song. I'll play that. Now with digital, we could get 50 releases in 1 week.
Right.
Sometimes more. And it's like, I don't have time to play all of this, much less listen to all of this with any kind of like, really be able to sit down and
enjoy
let it.
Or take it in.
Yeah. I mean, so the digital thing is both great because you can get these small independent bands that can make good sounding recordings and get them out to you. But there's so much stuff out there now.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's good.
Right. Even as just a fan, you get so many suggestions from friends and so many tags on Facebook and stuff like that you can't possibly check them all out.
No. Thrash Bombs was one I really liked this year. They're from Italy.
Thrash Bombs.
Thrash Bombs with a Z at the end.
Okay.
I just saw another one and I went over it. Vindicator. That's the one I was trying to remember from Ohio.
Right on.
They were really good.
I'm putting them in my list right now.
What about grindcore?
I don't get into too much grindcore.
I didn't see that coming at all.
I don't even know what the subgenres are. Like, that's how out of it I am.
You could probably list them off.
Well, I could begin to, I guess.
There's a million subgenres.
Oh, I know.
But I just played something last night that called itself spaghetti western metal. And I'm listening to it and I'm going, oh my God, it is. Because it had, the metallic sound in the foreground, and in the back you had this sort of spaghetti western thing going on. I'm like, this is incredible.
Like Ennio Morricone, kind of stuff.
Yeah. And I'm just like, I think I love this. I'm going to have to listen to the whole album.
Didn't you just do on Last Exit? Didn't you just do like one song for every 50 years of metal?
Yes. Yeah. And initially said 40 years because I wasn't actually checking my math.
So what did you start with? Like, what was like I guess 1966 would have been?
Well, we started with the modern day and went back to 66. And with 66, it was it was one of Lemmy's first bands. It wasn't even really a metal band. Let me see here.
Yeah.
The Rockin' Vickers. And it was Lemmy's first band. So although it's not metal, I figured it counts because it has,
Lemmy.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, is it any good? I mean,
no, not really. I mean, it's good for what it is, but it's like 60s
right,
light rock kind of thing.
Very simplistic.
Yeah, and then we did like Velvet Underground, Crazy World of Arthur Brown, Sand Gospel, Trapeze, and then up to Alice Cooper and Hawkwind and stuff like that.
Really, you had the Velvet Underground in there for metal. That's interesting.
Well, they had an influence on metal.
Yeah. What song did you play for that?
Venus and Furs.
Oh, I can see that. Yeah.
It's not metal, but at that point it was kind of like, okay, where were the influences to metal coming from?
Yeah. It's interesting. Your good friend Peter Robbins, like that guy has seen all the greatest bands ever, in my opinion.
Yes, he has.
One of the things that didn't go on the show, we were talking to him, and he just kind of mentions, like, I asked him about if he'd ever met Lou Reed or seen Lou Reed live, and he says, "Yeah, I saw them play at Max's Kansas City in like 1967," and I'm like, "What? Like for real?"
Well, not to put you on the spot again, but do you have any death metal bands that have got your attention lately?
Probably. I would say one that's not really quite a death metal band that doesn't exist anymore, but they were phenomenal, is a band called Anna Keffer out of L.A.
Anna Keffer.
Anakefr. And it means I am infidel. And the guy who was the front person for the band had gone over to Egypt to take film classes. I don't know why Egypt to take film classes, but that's where he went.
Yeah.
And he said, he had gone over not really, I guess he was sort of an agnostic, and he went over there and he saw all this fighting between the different religious groups. And he said it completely changed his worldview and turned him into a complete atheist, because he was like, if there's anything to these religions, it's not here. And so that when he came back, one of the songs they had, it starts screaming Anna Keffer, and they're like, "Ooh, that's our band name."
Interesting.
But they're a little bit thrash, a little bit death metal, and they were just phenomenal.
Is there anything you wanted to ask?
Well, I mean, he gave us a nice little list of name drops there to check out.
I would also say check out Birth AD.
See, I finally got somebody that's a metalhead on the show, Luke.
Thank you, Adam.
Hey, real quick, Seriah, before we go, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, too, was David Paulides' work. And we could really do a whole show on that. But
easily.
That is some crazy, crazy stuff. And I don't mean in the fact that it's insane, but just like the deeper you go on that, the more baffling it is. And that last book that he put out, I haven't read it. I did hear your interview with him and an interview he did on Coast to Coast, but that is some scary stuff.
Yes, yeah, because I mean, the stuff in the woods, you can at least sort of maybe say, well, maybe there's something else going. Maybe it's animals. I mean, it's not. But your brain can at least kind of go in that direction a little bit. But when you get to these cases in the cities where these kids keep showing up in the same way, that makes no sense, in places that make no sense, there's something behind it. There, whatever it is, whether it be government, I can't imagine why it would be government. That's the thing. Any idea you come up with doesn't make any sense. Why these people are being killed?
Yeah, it really doesn't. We talked about the Elisa Lam case on this show, and it very much fits the same pattern as those other cases, where somebody just disappears. They're gone. They're there 1 minute, gone the next, and then they show up days later in water, in some weird place. It's just close to where they disappeared. Yeah.
And the Elisa Lam one had a bunch of misinformation going around because, of course, it got it went viral on the internet. So
it was huge.
I'm going to be doing a show on that, trying to actually get to the bottom of what actually happened. Not that it's any less weird, but just kind of people said there's no way she could have gotten to the roof. Well, there's fire escapes going to the roof.
Yeah.
So if she really wanted to, there was a way she could have gotten to the roof. It doesn't mean she used the fire escapes, but you can't say there was no way she could get to the roof.
I think what's bizarre for me is like lifting that handle to actually get into the water tank, and just that's bizarre in and of itself. And then the coincidence with the movie Dark Water, is strange.
Yeah. And what's also strange is the whole tuberculosis test there that was called Lam Eliza.
Yeah,
that came out a few days later in the same area, and it's like, okay, that's really weird. Like, I can't imagine how it's connected, but what are the chances of that?
That's like Mike Clellan kind of stuff there.
Yes.
Synchronicity.
Yes, it is.
Well, Seriah, you've been an excellent guest. Thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything you guys wanted to add?
I don't know. Hail Satan.
I just want to
You can say that,
thank you. It's been fun. Yay.
We're gonna close this segment out.
Well-
But stay. Oh, go ahead.
If you got a second, can I quickly plug my show?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right, so you can find Where Did the Road Go at wheredidtheroadgo.com. We have our entire archive free, so you can go back and listen to any show you want. And if you're interested in metal, check out thelastexit.org. A bunch of our shows are up that you can just stream at any time, including, I haven't put that one up yet. I was going to say including the 50 Years of Metal. That'll be up soon.
Excellent. And I really, guys, I can't recommend Where Did the Road Go enough. It is an incredible show.
Thank you.
I
Thank
really-
you. I've been enjoying yours lately as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And we need to do this again. We really do.
Absolutely, anytime.
Maybe I could sit in on one of those round tables,
Yeah.
which you've kind of
Yeah.
inspired me to do, to start doing some of those. So,
I was hesitant to do them, and they've turned out really well, and
Oh,
I've
yeah.
really enjoyed them.
yeah, absolutely. All right, we're going to close this segment out, and we'll be right back on Conspirinormal. All right, guys, and we're back on Conspirinormal. Yeah, that was a great interview with Seriah Azkath. I really, really enjoyed that. What'd you think about that, Luke? That was, like I said, I finally got a metalhead on the show for you.
Dude is doing work in the metal community, so he's all right with me.
Yep. And we talk about Satanism and alien abduction and near-death experience. We covered a good ground there.
Oh yeah, he's another one of those guests that we could have like 10 shows with and like focus on a topic.
Yeah, yeah. And like I said before, I mean, his show is really great. I really enjoyed it. It's like just get a lot out of it listening to it. And he's like the roundtable discussions that he has with some of his guests are really some of the best stuff that I've really heard. And it's really just like guys talking and just having a conversation. I mean, he has like a structure to it, but yeah, they get in some deep areas, man, and it's really incredible. Well, as I said before, we won't do too long on this, but as I said before, we did lose a very important figure, and it wasn't Grizzly Adams, although he did die, and Alan Rickman died.
And the guy from the Eagles.
And the guy from the Eagles died. We've had like everybody die.
I don't know
like
his
the
name,
last,
just
the guy
from the Eagles.
Glenn Fry. Glenn Fry.
Will Smith's dad on Fresh Prince.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he
Yep.
did that.
Uncle
Yeah,
Phil.
he died too.
Yep.
Yeah, but David Bowie passed away,
Oh,
and I am a big Bowie fan.
same.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, like listening, like first exposure to Bowie was like "Let's Dance" and "China Girl." Those songs back in the '80s, and then but there's a whole generation that I've noticed, and they're mostly female, which I'm glad we have Alyssa here. that remember Bowie for something else completely different, and that would be the movie Labyrinth.
Well,
What was
How
that?
did you put it earlier?
How did you
Alyssa?
describe it on break?
okay, so there's this thing I've been seeing on Facebook called "quote unquote" sexual awakening. I didn't know what it was. I had no idea until I understood that my sexual awakening, quote unquote, was David Bowie. And a lot of people's sexual awakening
Quote,
was
unquote.
David Bowie. When we were young, we're kids of the 80s. There was something about David Bowie in the Labyrinth.
It was the pants.
Well,
The tights.
well, it was the bulge in the pants, but
That must be what Kira feels for Maynard.
Oh, from Tool.
Did you go to that?
Which
No.
she got to see last night.
Yeah, she had a great time.
But about 10 years before David Bowie did Labyrinth in the mid 70s, he kind of like, this is right after Ziggy Stardust, and like he kind of left that character behind. And then he did Diamond Dogs, which is kind of like a transition album. And then he did like a soul album. And around that time, like 75, 76, he got really into cocaine. Like the guy was really messed up. I think he got down to like
weren't they
90
all?
pounds or something, and he was like 6'2".
Yeah.
So like extremely emaciated. And if you look at him from that time period, I mean, he just looks really gaunt. And he also had this fascination with fascism and Nazism too. And of course, here he is, all, blonde hair, blue eye, David Bowie. Of course, one of the eyes, he is actually blind in one eye. But this is from Wikipedia page about him. So the extent to which drug addiction was now affecting Bowie was made public when Russell Hardy interviewed the singer for his London Weekend television talk show in anticipation of the album's supporting tour. Shortly before the satellite-linked interview was scheduled to commence, the death of Spanish dictator Franco was announced. Bowie was asked to relinquish the satellite booking to allow the Spanish government to put out a live news feed. This he refused to do, and his interview went ahead. In the ensuing lengthy conversation with Hardy, Bowie was incoherent and looked disconnected. His sanity, by his own admission, had later become twisted by cocaine. He overdosed several times in the year and was withering physically to an alarming degree. Bowie's positive comments about Hitler and Eric Clapton's about immigration in 1976 led to the establishment of Rock Against Racism. And apparently, this was the time that he, this time period, he was known as the character was the Thin White Duke. So he dressed in suits, and he really left the Ziggy Stardust stuff really behind at this point, and put out really what I think is one of his best albums, which is Station to Station. When he was crazy on cocaine, was his time was one of his best albums that he put out. Matters came to a head in London in May. This is 1976, in what became known as the Victoria Station incident. Arriving in an open-top Mercedes convertible, Bowie waved to the crowd in a gesture that some alleged was a Nazi salute, which was captured on camera and published in NME. Bowie said the photographer simply caught him in mid-wave. He later blamed his pro-fascism comments and his behavior during the period on his addictions and the character of the Thin White Duke. I was out of my mind, totally crazed. The main thing I was functioning on was mythology. That whole thing about Hitler and rightism. I discovered King Arthur. According to playwright Alan Franks, writing later in the Times, he was indeed deranged. He had some very bad experiences with hard drugs. And I've seen footage of Bowie from that time period, and there's a part where he's in a limo, and he's talking about how people were following them in the limo. People were government agents were following him, and he was just so out of his mind at that point. And, of course, cocaine usually makes you paranoid anyway.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like some of my friends.
Yeah. And in the late 70s, he actually went 77, he went and hung out with Iggy Pop in West Berlin and recorded 3 albums, and they recorded 2 of Iggy Pop's albums, which actually Bowie played on, and China Girl was on one of those albums, which he later re-released in the 80s on his album, which I actually like the Iggy Pop version better, but of course Bowie's playing on that, hanging out with Brian Eno in Berlin, and 3 of the albums that Bowie put out at that time were really some of his best work too, that he put out. He was a real cutting edge artist.
Yeah.
I remember he kind of he got real poppy in the 80s and got I think even for his point really big, and then he kind of just scaled things down and started this band called Tin Machine with this guitarist named Reeves Gabrels, who actually lives here in Nashville.
Yeah, I've met Reeves.
You've met him. Wow. Yeah, he's he's a great guitarist.
He's played with a lot of.
He's played with The Cure now, actually. And he, so Bowie scaled it down, and it was kind of listen to stuff like the Pixies and that, so it's kind of real kind of harder kind of rock and alternative rock. And in the 90s, he came back with with this more industrial sound. And that's when I saw him, was in 97. I'm Afraid of Americans, that song.
That's a great song.
Yeah. I love that video because Trent Reznor's chasing him through the street and stuff. And then he kind of scaled back again, and then 2003 was his next, well, not his next to last album, but he didn't put an album out for like 10 years, from 2003 to 2013. And what really amazes me is like to the very end, he was like true to his art. Like that video that they put out, like he put out his last album, Black Star, on his birthday, which turned out to be like 2 or 3 days before he died.
Right. Well, and he knew, and he spent his last month producing that video. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
They told him how long he had.
Yeah, he
And-
like
That's
18
dedication.
months he was sick, and nobody
Yeah.
knew. Nobody
didn't
knew.
know.
Nobody knew. Nobody
Not
knew
that I
except
was supposed to know, but
except
still.
his close family. And so he put out this album, and apparently he was working on a Broadway musical, and
Yeah.
and then like that video, man, is just like when you watch it. Like I didn't watch it till after he died,
yeah.
but like
Yeah.
yeah,
I still
mean,
haven't watched it.
it's.
I'm gonna cry.
It is.
I'm gonna cry.
You can tell like he knew it.
Oh, yeah, totally.
He's laying in a bed, and he's got like this.
Even the lyrics and stuff are.
He's got
blindfold
claws around
on.
his head.
Yeah. And then like at the very end of the video, he kind of like fades into this like cabinet, like a wardrobe, and closes in on him. Yeah. I mean, it's just like you could tell like that was his message to everybody. So rest in
Yeah.
peace, David Bowie.
Yeah.
Alyssa's
Oh, yeah.
Sexual Awakening. Next week we will be I'll be at the house. Rob's gonna be out roadieing, so but we're gonna have Rocky Stucci on to talk about what's going on in the world, and thank you guys for joining us, and we'll be back next week on
Conspirinormal.
Oh.